I want you to do something right now before you read another word. Think about the last time you woke up. What was the very first thing that went into your body? For most of you watching this, I already know the answer because I've asked hundreds of patients the same question. It was coffee. Black, hot, on an empty stomach, often before your feet even fully found your slippers. It feels harmless. It feels, honestly, like the one small pleasure you're allowed to keep, and I'm not here to take it away from you, but I need to tell you something that almost nobody in medicine explains clearly, and it matters far more after 55 than it did at 30. That cup of coffee, taken the way most of us take it, first thing before food, is quietly forcing your body through a chemical event that raises your blood sugar, spikes your stress hormones, and puts extra strain on your heart and blood vessels every single morning for years without you ever noticing a thing. I'm Dr. Richard James. I've spent years focused specifically on cardiovascular and metabolic health in adults over 55, and this channel exists for one reason: to translate what the research actually shows into plain language, without the fear-mongering and without the sales pitch. What I'm about to walk you through today isn't about giving up coffee. Coffee, over the long run, is actually one of the more protective habits in your daily routine. The problem isn't the coffee. The problem is the timing, and almost nobody has ever explained that difference to you. Stay with me all the way through, because the fix for this costs you nothing, takes no extra time out of your morning, and doesn't require you to drink a single sip less coffee than you already do. I'll show you exactly what changes and when. But first, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment right now and tell me, what time do you have your first cup, and is it before or after you eat anything? Just type before or after. I read every single one, and your answers tell me exactly who I'm talking to in this community. Let's get into what's actually happening inside your body during that first cup. Before we go further, I need to give you one concept, because without it, none of what follows will fully click into place. I call it the double alarm. Here's what almost nobody tells you. Your body doesn't need coffee to wake up. It already has its own built-in alarm system, and it goes off automatically every single morning, whether you drink caffeine or not. It's called the cortisol awakening response. In the first 30 to 45 minutes after you open your eyes, your brain sends a signal down a chain of command from the hypothalamus to the pituitary gland to your adrenal glands, and cortisol, your primary stress and alertness hormone, surges upward. This isn't a malfunction. It's a beautifully designed system that raises your blood pressure slightly, releases stored sugar for quick energy, and sharpens your focus so you can get out of bed and function. Now picture what happens when you pour caffeine directly into that window. Caffeine works by blocking a brain chemical called adenosine, which is essentially your body's natural slowdown signal. Block adenosine, and your brain interprets it as a green light to release even more of the same stress chemistry that's already surging on its own. You're not just waking your body up, you're layering a second alarm directly on top of the first one that was already ringing. That's the double alarm, and it's the foundation for everything else in today's video. Here's why this matters more after 55 than it did in your 30s. Two systems in your body change with age in ways that make this double alarm hit harder. First, your liver clears caffeine more slowly, so the chemical stays active in your system longer. Second, and this is the part that concerns me most as someone who focuses on cardiovascular and metabolic health, a huge number of adults over 55 are walking around with some degree of insulin resistance and have no idea. Current public health data shows that well over 100 million American adults are living with prediabetes, and roughly 8 out of 10 of them don't know it. When you stack a stress hormone surge on top of a body that's already struggling quietly to manage blood sugar, the effect isn't small. It's compounding. Think of it this way. If your metabolism is running smoothly, one extra jolt in the morning is like a small ripple in a calm lake, but if your metabolism is already under strain, that same ripple becomes a wave that pushes things further off balance. That's the difference age makes, and it's why this conversation is worth having today, rather than someday. If you've ever noticed a jittery, wired feeling in the first 20 minutes after your coffee, only for it to fade oddly fast once you finally eat something, type yes in the comments. I want to see how many of you already recognize this pattern without ever having a name for it. Now let's walk through exactly what's happening inside your body, one piece at a time. The first thing happening is what I already introduced, the double alarm itself. But I want you to understand the mechanism a little more precisely, because this is the piece everything else builds on. When caffeine hits your bloodstream on an empty stomach, it triggers your brain to release a hormone called corticotropin-releasing hormone, which tells your pituitary gland to release another hormone called ACTH, which then tells your adrenal glands, sitting right on top of your kidneys, to pump out more cortisol. At the same time, your adrenal glands release epinephrine and norepinephrine, the classic fight or flight chemicals. In a healthy young adult who hasn't had coffee in a while, this produces a noticeable but temporary rise in stress hormones. Research on caffeine and cortisol has consistently shown this pattern across the diurnal cycle in people tested after a period of caffeine abstinence. If you drink coffee daily, your body does build some tolerance at that specific morning peak. But here's the detail that surprises people. That tolerance is only partial. It reduces the intensity of the surge. It never eliminates it. You are never fully immune to this effect, no matter how many years you've been a coffee drinker. Ask yourself honestly, do you ever feel your heart beating just a little faster or harder in the 15 minutes after that first cup, even before you've finished it? That's not your imagination. That's the double alarm doing exactly what it's designed to do. The second thing happening, and this one surprises almost everyone, is what I think of as the empty warehouse withdrawal. Picture your liver as a warehouse that stores sugar for emergencies, in a form called glycogen, when epinephrine surges through your bloodstream. It sends a direct signal to that warehouse to start shipping out its stock immediately, through a process called glycogenolysis, and to start manufacturing even more sugar from scratch, through a process called gluconeogenesis. This is exactly what your body is supposed to do during a genuine emergency, like outrunning a threat, but you're not running from anything. You're standing in your kitchen in your robe, and your liver doesn't know the difference. It responds to the chemical signal, not the actual situation, and it dumps sugar into your bloodstream before you've eaten a single calorie. Clinical research testing this exact scenario has found that people who drink a strong black coffee before a carbohydrate-containing meal show a meaningfully larger and more prolonged rise in blood sugar afterward compared to when the same meal is eaten without that fasting caffeine hit first. Their blood sugar climbs higher and it stays elevated longer into the following 2 hours. That's not a small footnote. That's your body processing the exact same breakfast completely differently depending on what you drank 30 minutes earlier. Let me tell you about Carol. Carol is 66, a retired accountant from Denver, sharp as anyone I've worked with and deeply diligent about her health. She came to me confused because her home glucose monitor, which her doctor had her using after a mildly elevated A1C reading, kept showing higher numbers in the morning than any other time of day, even though breakfast was consistently her lightest meal. When we walked through her actual routine minute by minute, the pattern became obvious. 2 full cups of black coffee every morning, a solid 45 minutes before she ate anything at all. We didn't take away her coffee, we simply moved it. I'll show you exactly how in a few minutes. Her morning numbers came down within about 3 weeks, without a single change to her diet. If you're recognizing any of this so far, type the word warehouse in the comments. I want to know how many of you are seeing your own mornings in this description. The third thing happening is what I call the locked door effect, and it's the piece that connects the sugar spike to something even more concerning: your body's ability to actually use that sugar under normal circumstances. When sugar rises in your blood, your pancreas releases insulin, which acts like a key, unlocking doors on the surface of your muscle cells so sugar can move out of the bloodstream and into the tissue where it's actually needed. But that same epinephrine surge we just discussed does something else at the same time. It interferes with a specific transporter called GLUT4, essentially jamming the lock so insulin has a harder time opening those doors, even when there's plenty of insulin available. Your pancreas notices sugar isn't clearing the way it should, so it compensates by releasing even more insulin than usual. Research measuring this directly has found meaningfully higher insulin levels in the blood 30 minutes after a fasting caffeine and glucose challenge, and yet, despite that extra insulin, blood sugar remains stubbornly elevated. That mismatch, high insulin but still high sugar, is the signature of temporary insulin resistance, and it's happening inside your body every single morning you follow this pattern. Here's why this matters specifically for you watching this after 55. This effect isn't permanent from any single morning. It resolves once your body settles back down, but repetition changes the math entirely. A pancreas asked to overproduce insulin every single morning, year after year, is a pancreas under chronic low-grade strain. And for anyone already sitting in that prediabetic range we talked about earlier, remember, most of them don't even know it, this daily pattern can be quietly nudging things in the wrong direction. The fourth thing happening explains why this hits differently after 55 than it did at 35, and I call it the slow drain. Your liver clears caffeine out of your system using a specific enzyme system called CYP1A2. In a younger adult, this enzyme works efficiently, and caffeine's active effects clear out in a predictable window. But liver enzyme activity naturally declines with age, alongside reduced liver blood flow and often a body composition shift toward less muscle and more fat tissue. Because caffeine distributes through lean muscle mass rather than fat, an older adult with less muscle experiences a higher concentration of caffeine in the bloodstream from the exact same cup, and that caffeine simply lingers longer before it's cleared. Think of it like a drain that used to empty a full sink in a few minutes and now takes considerably longer to do the same job. The water level, in this case, your circulating stress hormones and their downstream effects, stays elevated for a longer stretch of your morning. There's also a genetic piece worth knowing about. A specific variation in that same CYP1A2 gene determines whether someone is a fast or slow caffeine metabolizer. Slow metabolizers process caffeine less efficiently regardless of age, and when you combine that genetic pattern with the natural slowdown that comes after 55, the caffeine and its downstream chemical effects can circulate for considerably longer than most people ever realize. Some people also take other medications, blood pressure drugs, cholesterol medications that share metabolic pathways in the liver, which can further affect how long caffeine's effects hang around. You don't need to know your own genetics to benefit from what I'm about to show you. You just need to understand that your body may be holding on to this chemical event longer than you'd assume. Let me tell you about Walter. Walter is 71, a retired mechanic from Ohio, been drinking 2 cups of black coffee every morning since he was a young man. Always on an empty stomach, always the same way. He came to see me not for his coffee habit at all, but because he'd started noticing an uncomfortable pounding sensation in his chest most mornings that would ease up by midday. His cardiac workup came back clean, no blockages, no rhythm abnormality requiring treatment. When we reviewed his morning routine, the pattern was clear. Coffee immediately on waking, no food for over an hour afterward, and a body that, at 71, was simply holding on to that stimulant longer than it used to. We changed nothing about how much coffee he drank. We changed only the sequence. Within about 2 weeks, the morning pounding sensation had essentially disappeared. If any part of Walter's story sounds familiar, type slow drain in the comments so I know this is landing. The fifth and final piece is what I call the morning surge multiplier, and this is the one I want you to take most seriously because it touches your blood vessels directly. Your blood pressure already rises naturally in the early morning hours as part of your body's normal wake-up sequence. This is a well-documented pattern, and it's actually one of the reasons heart attacks and strokes are statistically more common in the first few hours after waking than at almost any other time of day. Aging blood vessels lose some of their natural elasticity and become somewhat stiffer over time, which means the same pressure surge produces a sharper rise than it would in a younger, more flexible vascular system. Caffeine adds a further pressor effect on top of that, largely through the same epinephrine and norepinephrine release we've already discussed. Layer a caffeine-driven pressure spike directly onto a vascular system that's already less forgiving during the exact window when cardiovascular events are statistically more likely to begin with, and you can see why this deserves more attention than it typically gets. I want to be precise here because I don't want to alarm you unnecessarily. For most healthy adults, this effect is modest and temporary. It is not on its own a reason to panic about your morning cup, but if you already manage high blood pressure, if you've had any cardiac event in the past, or if you've simply never checked what your blood pressure looks like right after that first cup, this is worth paying attention to, and it's exactly the kind of detail worth bringing to your own doctor. Before I give you the practical fix, I want to be clear about when this crosses from a lifestyle habit worth adjusting into something that needs a doctor's attention. Please make an appointment promptly and don't wait for your next scheduled visit. If you notice any of the following: a racing or irregular heartbeat that doesn't settle down within a few minutes, chest pain, tightness or pressure at any point in the morning, dizziness or lightheadedness after your coffee that goes beyond a brief moment, or a home blood pressure reading that spikes noticeably higher right after your first cup compared to your baseline. If you take blood pressure medication, blood thinners, or any diabetes medication, that's also a good reason to specifically ask your doctor or pharmacist how caffeine timing might interact with what you're already taking. I am not telling you to change any medication or stop your coffee on your own. These signs deserve a real conversation with your physician, not a home adjustment. Now let's turn everything we've covered into something practical you can start using immediately without giving up a single cup of coffee. Tonight, set out whatever you need for a small protein-containing breakfast so it's ready before you're even fully awake tomorrow. This could be as simple as 2 hard-boiled eggs already in the fridge, a container of plain Greek yogurt, or a small handful of nuts on the counter. The goal is removing every excuse to skip straight to the coffee pot. Tomorrow morning, when you wake up, drink a full glass of water first, before anything else. This supports the hydration you lost overnight and gives your natural cortisol awakening response room to do its job without caffeine layered on top of it immediately. Then wait, not forever, just 60 to 90 minutes if you can manage it, and eat something with protein and a little healthy fat before your first cup. This single sequence change, food and hydration before caffeine, is the entire fix. Your coffee tastes exactly the same. Your morning takes no extra time if you simply reorder what you're already doing. This week, if you deal with any reflux or stomach discomfort alongside your coffee, consider trying a darker roast or a cold brew for a few days. Both tend to be gentler on the stomach lining than a standard light roast. If you're on multiple prescription medications, ask your pharmacist in under a minute whether any of them interact. With caffeine metabolism, they can typically tell you on the spot, and if you track your blood sugar or blood pressure at home, try checking your numbers on 2 mornings, one the old way and one with food first, so you can see the difference in your own body rather than taking my word for it. Ongoing, aim to have your last caffeinated beverage of the day before early afternoon, roughly by noon or 1 o'clock, since caffeine's effects linger longer than most people expect at this age, and late intake can quietly fragment your sleep without you connecting the dots and keep the core habit going indefinitely. Water first, food with protein next, coffee after. It costs you nothing, and it lets you keep the parts of coffee that are genuinely good for you. Because I do want to leave you with this. The long-term research on coffee is overall reassuring. People who drink coffee regularly over years tend to show a meaningfully lower long-term risk of type 2 diabetes compared to those who rarely drink it, and that protective association tends to grow stronger with each additional cup. Up to a point, that benefit comes largely from plant compounds in coffee itself, not the caffeine. The problem was never coffee. The problem was asking your body to process a stimulant on top of an empty stomach during the one window of the day it's least equipped to absorb that extra jolt. Let's bring this together. We covered the double alarm, your natural cortisol surge stacked with caffeine's effect on adenosine. We covered the empty warehouse withdrawal, your liver dumping sugar into your bloodstream before you've eaten anything. We covered the locked door effect, temporary insulin resistance that forces your pancreas to overwork. We covered the slow drain, why your aging liver holds on to caffeine longer than it used to. And we covered the morning surge multiplier, the added strain on blood vessels during the very window your cardiovascular system is already working hardest. I know that's a lot to take in, but my goal here was never to scare you away from something you enjoy. My goal is to hand you one piece of information that changes how your body experiences a habit you're already going to keep. You decide when that first sip happens. You decide whether food comes first. This is entirely within your control, and it costs you nothing but a small window of patience each morning. If this video connected a few dots for you, do 3 things for me. First, share it, send it to your spouse, your sibling, a friend who reaches for coffee the same way every single morning without a second thought. This is the kind of small free information that genuinely helps someone. Second, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because I publish new research-backed videos like this every week, built specifically for adults who want real answers, not hype. And third, leave a comment and tell me, will you be moving your first cup of coffee tomorrow morning? I read every single response, and your story might be exactly what helps someone else finally understand their own mornings. Your heart works for you every second of every day, long before you've even poured your first cup. Return the favor with one small informed choice each morning. I'm Dr. Richard James, and I sincerely wish you a long, strong, and steady life. Take care of your heart. I'll see you in the next one.